Today, we're going to be exploring some of my all-time favorite train infrastructure. Definitely not the prettiest, most times go unnoticed, but these are the sort of places that I am drawn to the most, for whatever reason. Now, unfortunately, the train lines in City Skylines 2 do leave a lot to be desired. They're about as bare bones as they can get, which, on face value, is really frustrating. But it does give us a pretty good blank canvas to work with. And I reckon with the right mods and assets, we are actually able to create some pretty cool pieces of infrastructure. At least I reckon they're cool. And I know deep down, you guys like these areas too. Welcome back to St. Andros. In the last episode, we laid down the foundation of our train network, at least around Smog Island, putting in our train depot and maintenance yard, as well as probably one of the largest cargo terminals we're going to see within St. Andros. But to get it up to scratch, I do think we need to put in a bit of time and effort into the detail work around this train line. There's a few little bits and pieces we can add down here that I think will truly make this place look far more realistic and just really take it to the next level. So I've got a pretty good foundation of train line down here at the very moment. What good timing. Hello, Mr. Train. So over this side, this is going to be our functional terminal that is still in service. And as you can see, our train is already coming along to make a delivery. And then this side is going to be all abandoned. Still got to try and figure out how to weave a lot of this network around some of these older buildings and road network. First things first, I would like to address one of my biggest complaints within City Skylines 2, and it's something to do with the train network. I have to say, it drives me nuts that we have such a detailed train line. Like, look at the sleepers, look at the train rails, if that's what you call them. They look superb. Gritty, realistic, detailed, amazing. But why oh why is the gravel and the grass texture just such a clean cut here? Like, look at this. In no world does it ever look like this. I hate it. And I've never been able to solve this issue, but I've actually got a bit of a plan now. I'm going to use some of these net lanes. I have grabbed a whole bunch from PDX mods. I've even got some railway ground covers, which do work pretty well, especially when you align them up, but I am going to try something a little bit different. And I don't need to tell you that that looks a million times better. It is just so subtle and so simple, but so important. So I am going to continue to do that probably for the entire network because I think it's totally essential. I've gone through and just changed it in certain areas, just experimenting, but I actually kind of like the idea that maybe some areas just have different types of gravel, or maybe there's been a spillage, or maybe some track repairs. I might continue to do that in certain areas, and I reckon that's kind of fun. I've been getting pretty detailed down here, and I plan to double down on it because this is, in my opinion, a really fun focal point for the city, and I plan to really detail all of this up. I have gone through and added in a lot of these little bushes down here. These are the flower bushes, and this is what they look like by default, which is fine, but I'm going to turn off snapping and just lower him down into the ground. As you can see, he's just poking through a little bit. And then I am using tree controller to give me a bit more flexibility here and changing it to dead. And as you can see, that makes a pretty good little tuft of grass. But the same idea with tree controller, just adding in some dead trees as well. They do just add a lot in terms of the atmosphere and also variation too. Like these are bushes that are technically dead. They look pretty good like that. So let's continue the theme and get a little bit more detailed. Alright, it's been a few days and I've been getting pretty lost in a lot of the detail work down here, and as you can see, a bit of the expansion work too. So a few things to go over and a few things left to do. I've already got some ideas of changes I want to make and some things I still want to flesh out. But let's go back to where we were working before, and I think that this is looking pretty fun. We've obviously got a lot more bits and pieces down here, like a lot of industrial waste, and I reckon there's just like little things like these barriers that just make a huge amount of difference, and even things like that concrete slab over there, and I just think that just adds a whole ton. Now, something I'm a really big fan of are the graffitis on the side of these hoppers, and I originally wasn't able to do this. I've had to be a bit sneaky here, and instead you can put graffiti on certain props. So these little containers here, you can actually put graffiti on these props. And then I just hide them into the side of this hopper. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty clunky and not super ideal. And now I can pop some graffiti on the side of this hopper, which is pretty fun. I am going to do this one here. And we might do like that guy. And then this rusty effect is also pretty fun to put on the side. I mean, I do want to show that this is definitely a pretty rusty and old carriage. So I'm just going to go and just add a ton of rust effect and maybe even some little bits of moss. Might be kind of fun. And then just to cover up those containers still poking through because they don't look great like that, I will add in some of some of the piles just to go over the top, and I reckon that'll look pretty nice. So this is a total vibe in my opinion. I am a huge fan of how all this is looking. This is all abandoned and a bit marshy and a bit swampy. And then we've also got, oh my gosh, it rocks. How did they do that? Okay, so this is a custom asset and it moves. And when you get really close, you can see all the bits and pieces that go into something like this. This is obviously grabbed from PDX mods and it just looks so great. So I'm pretty impressed that it bobs because I didn't expect it to do that. But yeah, there it is. Oh, I see why. There's a boat underneath it. Do you see it? Okay, great. That is so clever. But yeah, this is all super fun. I am a pretty big fan of all this. Just a bit of an abandoned old dock, and you can see that it's all just kind of crumbling apart. It's not super perfect, and you know, it could be so much better. But I think for just like a wooden dock that has definitely seen better days, I reckon that is totally fine. But then a part of it that is still totally functional is all of this area. A couple of things that I like. I really like the way that all of these containers are stacked on top of each other. If you're like, hey, they would never do something like this. Well, I was taking inspiration from this stack of containers, and look, it's probably not exactly the same, and I don't know how they are managing to do it with a bridge over the top, but it is what it is. Now, I am pretty happy with most of what I've done so far, but there are a couple of areas which I do think we can do a little bit better. One area in particular, up here, I just think is a little bit underwhelming, and I do have an idea which I'm going to just have a little crack at because it might not work. But basically, all up here is inspired by a section around South Kearney, and I really like this area because as you can see, yes, there is a train line and a bit of a depot over here as part of this industrial area. However, at one point in time, there totally was a train line that ran all the way through here, crossed two bridges. These no longer exist, but you can see bits of that infrastructure still around. And on the other side, they've actually used a lot of this train line as the beginnings of the light rail network around Jersey City. Now, come on. That is so cool. I wish Smog Island was as cool as that. I think we might be able to do something a little bit similar. For it to be in a similar spot within Smog Island, I would have to have a network that went all the way along here, which would make sense. I mean, this is a pretty good spot for a bridge. However, it wouldn't make any sense to have any sort of bridge over here because, well, that seems a little bit too far-fetched. However, we do have a section over here, and maybe this brand new fancy highway, although it's not really brand new or fancy these days, it's looking a bit old and tattered. Maybe this replaced whatever was down here at some point. So yes, I am demolishing things that I've already built, but I do think that this is going to be so much better. So this is where the old train network used to stretch across. There is an old bridge here now, and I'm about to demolish him, and I do need to rethink all of this now. Now that I've got this network here, I'm gonna go through and just demolish it like so. And then I reckon we just create a bit of a section just to show where it once used to sit, and I reckon we'll leave those pillars there. And so what I'm trying to do here is just to show where there was in fact infrastructure for a bridge, and rather than completely redeveloping this whole section, they have just reused where that network used to sit. So instead, now we just have a whole bunch of these parked trucks, and so I'm imagining that this is part of some sort of storage facility, maybe even used as part of this cargo terminal. And maybe these are all kind of connected in some sort of way. I don't know, I'm still trying to figure that out, but I do like seeing the old infrastructure and how it's still somewhat intact. I will continue to potentially add, I don't know, maybe like where the road used to stretch around here and maybe the bridge was right next to it. I'm still trying to figure all that out. And in terms of figuring out, what do we use this for? A light rail? Might be a little bit hard to justify over here, but something over here would be kind of fun. A million textures later, and I am so happy with this. So I have gone to a lot of detail just adding in textures, a lot of different ground colors. I am a really big fan of these mounds that I have added in. I've noticed that around a lot of these industrial areas, they kind of use abandoned sites and open space just to kind of fill in with, I don't know, maybe buried rubbish or just industrial waste. I'm not really quite sure, but there are a whole bunch of these mounds around these areas. So I think it's kind of fun to have one of them here, which you can kind of imagine was maybe where the old road used to sit and connect up to whatever bridge is going to be over here, well, whatever network will be over here. I've also got another mound over here too, and I reckon that just is a nice little bit of detail just to add to some of these random spaces. You can see how even just a very subtle little dirt path as it kind of stretches from this road here. I don't know, just little things that you might not even notice unless I showed you. But yeah, in my books, it makes such a big difference just spending the extra time and efforts to detail up areas like this. Yes, it does take quite a long time to drag all these networks out and build custom factories, but it is totally worth it. Okay, let's put a bit of a pause on the detail work and focus on fixing a couple of the issues within the city, because there's no point putting in the time and effort into some of these areas if they're just gonna burn to the ground anyway. After rebuilding the factory, it was time to focus a bit more on some of the infrastructure around here, because a lot of our problems are stemming from the lack of Well, roads and infrastructure to support the amount of people coming from the outside connections, so I thought that it might be a good idea to build another bridge that is stretching along the other side of the bay. I feel like this is a fairly old road with some newer additions, like some of these off-ramps that are connecting up to this other road, which I do think is a worthy connection. We definitely needed something like this. Although what you're going to notice is that the traffic is only going to get far worse, and that's not a reflection on the roads, that is more of a reflection on what's going on in downtown St. Andros, but that is a topic for a little bit later in this episode. But I did just want to spend a bit of time just adding in some more warehouses and storage facilities within Smog Island. I really needed to figure out, well, once I had figured out what the roads were looking like, the blocks around here were going to be pretty much all occupied by warehouses and just larger factories and open space dedicated to storage. But I did also want to dedicate a block of this area to some sort of fire service. So we do have a helicopter pad, which is, going to be really useful, especially for around here. But I'm also noticing that a lot of places within St. Andros are starting to burn, and I don't have any firefighters actually able to reach those locations, especially when they are, trying to navigate the streets, which are definitely not great at the moment. So it is great to have the option to have helicopters within the game to actually reach these places that the roads can't really get you there. What I'm doing now is I'm also placing down a postal service. I'm using one of these blocks and splicing it into what I think that this building is in fact maybe part of a modular building that is part of something to do with the postal service. I don't really know, can't really remember, but this does work pretty well. I'm making this a fairly large one because during this time, I'm also trying to increase a bit of the happiness within the city. And one of the biggest negatives, one of the things that was letting us down the most was a negative postal service. So I just went through and added in a bunch of mailboxes around the streets throughout the entire city. But then I'm also just adding in some, more postal facilities. And this is a bit more of a custom one. I really like this location, and I reckon that the building itself actually works really nicely too. But I just wanted to finish up this area just by filling in some gaps and putting in some low level amount of detail. I'm like not really doing too much in terms of decals, and in terms of props, just keeping it pretty simple too. But one thing that I did really enjoy doing was I just made some of these intersections a little bit wider, because we are dealing with some pretty wide trucks around here, pretty big trucks, so I did need to make the streets a little bit wider. So these intersections are now rocking a bit of a cul-de-sac in the middle of it. But now it's time to move back to our train line after fixing a whole bunch of the problems and now seeing a bit of a profit. I wanted to get back to all this network and figure out what this bridge was going to look like. This is very much the main focus of the rest of the build, because this thing really becomes quite epic. And this is just one of those pieces of infrastructure that I really enjoy about train lines. And I'm not really quite sure what the right term is. Like, is this a bridge? Is this an overpass? I'm not really quite sure. It's probably a bit of both. But it really is a very interesting piece of infrastructure, just these rectangular shapes for the tunnel sections of the train line that go underneath this pass, the trees and bushes and all the bits and pieces surrounding it, the embankment. It is all just a full-on vibe. And I also really like the idea that we just don't have anything close to this in City Skylines 2. Even the grittiness, we have nothing remotely close. So I really enjoyed the idea of the challenge, and not to harp on about this over and over again, but I wanted a bit of a focal point. And you're gonna get some really, really cool vistas of the city from this angle where we do actually get something down here. Because at the moment, you can see that I am having a bit of a hard time trying to figure out how to get some sort of tunnel system underneath this overpass, and it's definitely not called an overpass. What is the, I should probably just look this up, but I'm not going to. But I did try quite a few ideas. I tried some cement slabs on either side, some fences. I tried turning the tracks down below into keys on either side, or even retaining walls, but none of that was working. I really needed to get some sort of rectangular shape so that it definitely had the same infrastructure as the source of inspiration, but yeah, just nothing was really quite cutting it. So what I ended up doing instead was I ended up dragging out a couple of lines of this brick wall, which I have used previously. I think I've used to make a custom train station at some point. I dragged them out on just an open field and then used Move It to drag them underneath this bridge. Let's call it a bridge from now. But these are pretty nice and versatile. They are not recolorable, which is a bit of a shame, but I can slap some certain types of decals on the side of them, so that's what we're doing for a bit more grit to it. But the actual bridge itself, I needed to have some gravel on the top. So I ended up converting the bridge from being elevated to at ground level, but because it is still technically above or the train line below it, it does maintain its height, but it does mean there is a ground like wall where the tunnel is. So if you were to look through the tunnel, there is a wall, unfortunately. I don't love it, but this is the only way I could continue to use the same gravel texture up top, and then even splice in some of these piles, which just work so well. I mean, at the moment, you're probably thinking, this doesn't work that well. But when we start changing the color and when we start really getting quite heavy with some of the decals, that's when it really does start to transform. Because at the moment, as I was placing these things down, I was thinking, I don't know if this is gonna work. You know, it's like sometimes I have these things in my mind and I, you know, have a plan for how it's gonna look, and I am only using Google Earth as a reference, and then as I start to place them down, I go, okay, I can see where this is going, but is this actually gonna happen? And to be honest, this probably could have just been the entire build, because I do pour in probably like a day and a half worth of trial and error and just detail work, and even just reconnecting up train lines and just making it so that it's not super wonky. Now, I was pretty happy with the wall, but I did want some variation. I wanted to see some sort of like little gaps between, and maybe making it so that some sections were just pillars, or maybe there were just like some slight variation, just so that it was a little bit different in certain areas. So I am using a whole bunch of these chimneys, which are just one of those very versatile parts of the game. Like sometimes you just have these items that are just super versatile, and I have definitely used this one more than a couple of times, and I'm not really quite sure if this is super realistic or if there's any true functionality behind it. I don't know, if you are someone who maybe knows trains a little bit better than I do, I don't know, maybe give a bit of reasoning why there might be something like this around here. And then for this section, I went back to my retaining wall method, because I needed to make some sort of change between this rectangular part and then the section that goes over the top of the road and this other section of track. Because unfortunately, I couldn't continue the same method. It needed to switch up a bit just because we were at a different angle. And while I continued to ponder how I was going to actually make that work, I decided to spend a bit of time just figuring out what the detail work could look like in terms of changing the ground color and adding in some different types of gravel and different surfaces, and even getting into some of the decals on the side of this wall. I find it pretty interesting that we have some decals that attach themselves to certain walls and certain props, and then other decals that seem to go on all of them, or some that just go on only one certain type. So I was just having a bit of a play and seeing what I could do down here. It's great to have stuff like the eyedrop tool, because essentially I can just, go through, find it, try and find all the bits and pieces that are actually going to work. And then once I have a good idea of the certain style that I'm going to go in, I can then just eyedrop all the bits and pieces that I've placed down, and then just replace them down in other different spots. But this is where I start to get pretty over the top in terms of detail, and I really just can't help myself. As soon as I start scrolling through, I start going, maybe if I place down a couple of these bushes, maybe we get some rust decals to go on the side of these walls, and we get some graffiti, and oh man, there's just a giant rabbit hole around here, and I really just couldn't help myself. I think the thing that really makes this place look just far better is just adding all those rust decals on top of all that gravel, because I definitely needed to kind of like bridge the gap, pardon the pun, but bridge the gap between what's happening down below with all that dirty gravel effect and then what's happening up top. But something that was, there's parts of this that are like really fun, and there's parts of it that are just super, super annoying to do. And placing all those fences and railings on top, which probably isn't that realistic. You probably don't really need railings up there. I don't know, maybe workers go up there, but I felt like I needed something. And unfortunately, that something was pretty finicky. So this whole area is dedicated to that maintenance shard, and I wanted to place a train just to get an idea of, well, actually we're gonna be having a whole bunch of trains down here, but I wanted to place one train in particular that was going to be probably the one that is going from our outside connection into the main heart of St. Andros. In terms of the color scheme, I am basing this off Amtrak, and I like the fact that it's not entirely the same, but it's still a bit the same, if you know what I mean. So the color scheme's the same, but the placement of the colors are a little bit different. So I reckon that's kind of fun, but I'm also open to changing it to something different. If you've got an idea of what else we could do instead, let me know. But with those trains down, it really elevated this whole area into something that I felt like was actually really starting to come together. Now with the decals and the graffiti and the trees, I was starting to get a pretty good sense of how it was all going to start to come together. I was feeling really happy with all these little bits of detail. It was then time to move on to the segment of this bridge that I didn't really know what to do here. I knew that I wanted something that kind of reflected a truss bridge, but we just don't have anything remotely close to that within City Skylines 2. So I ended up going to these containers that I used for the bridge that I built a couple of episodes ago, and this actually somehow worked kind of well. I mean, you have to use your imagination a bit, and definitely paired with some of these rust decals definitely brings it a little bit more to life. But by placing them all out in a row, I was also able to align them up to the actual bridge network, which wasn't completely flat. So I was lucky to be able to change the height of those containers the way that I did. But I reckon that this is so fine, and paired with some of the surface as well, which does go over the top of, this is all on the ground, but it does paint the network a little bit of a different color. As you can see, makes it look a bit more rusty, so that actually worked so well. But there are quite a few little details that I am not really showing you too much in this time lapse. I'm kind of flying through a lot of it, and I will go through a bit more of it in the live play, which is coming up. But the final piece of the puzzle for me was to create some custom catenaries, which I think really elevate all of the detail work around here. I am still not like super satisfied with the method we have to use to actually make these come to life. I am using some catwalks and, well, a mix of catwalks and then also this ladder just to kind of fill it out a little bit more. And then I'm also doubling up on the catenaries, the real life ones, the ones that we have in the game on either end. But again, you do have to use your imagination, and you just have to kind of not get too hung up on the fact that it's actually not super accurate. But I do know that it is far better than if I was just to leave it as basically the vanilla version with just catenaries all over the place. But with that, let's dive back into a live play, and I'll give you a bit of a tour of all the things that I've been building and also build a couple of extra things. When you get the timing right, you can get multiple trains using this section, but at this moment, I'm pretty happy just with the one going over the top. I am feeling just so happy with the amount of movement down here. Probably a little bit too much on the road, but we will talk about that a little bit later in this video. I would like to just give you a bit of a fly around and show you some of the things that I have done on screen, but then also off screen, because I've actually done a few things that I probably didn't really explain in the time lapse. I will just say though, as much as there is detail down here, over this section, we are still yet to do it all. And now that I've got a good idea of how to tackle it, I am going to save this for the live stream on Friday. So if you are watching this video as it comes out on the weekend, I am going to be dedicating that live stream for all down here. But let's start over here where we started off our time lapse, and I am pretty stoked with the way that all this looks. I'm just happy that it just got a very different vibe to other areas within St. Andros. It is not functioning the best at this very moment, but I reckon that we will probably have to get some actual functionality with some of these warehouses, because at the moment they're purely for looks, except for our postal service, which is doing a great job, but it clearly is not. It is doing a terrible job at that. So basically at this very moment, we have a lot of people trying to avoid this intersection by going all around here, and that is truly not ideal. I mean, it's terrible, and I know you all are screaming at me from your various screens around the world, but we will talk about this later in this video. I've got a few things to talk about that. But I think you can get a good sense of the scale of this place. We do have multiple warehouses and factories, and each one of them is pretty much taking up an entire block each. There's a couple down here that are taking up multiple. We actually have 2 warehouses and this whole section dedicated to one industry. So there's a lot going on down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to continue to splice in a lot of these little cube industries. We do already have tons spliced into smog industries, but you can see we've got space down here too. So it's just a matter of going through and placing them down. And these are great because we really do have quite a bit of industrial demand. At the moment, it's a bit lower than usual, but yeah, there is quite a lot of industrial demand down here. So I am gonna continue to splice these little blocks into this section. And for places like this, which kind of feels like it is dedicated to recycling, I do need a bit of recycling. Not just recycling, I need some more waste management. Actually, let's dedicate it to hazardous waste, and I'll just do that. And we will get some trucks. That is perfect right there. And I think I got to splice one of these in. Did that work? There we go. So a lot of fun little details, and I am really happy with how all of it has turned out, because this is such a big focal point. I really needed to go pretty hard with a lot of this detail, and obviously continuing these custom catenaries, which I think adds a lot. But just as a little bit of a spoiler for the next episode, which I usually say for the end of the videos, but I'm just gonna show you a bit of it now. We're gonna be focusing on the downtown, which you might think, that looks alright, but it just is not. This is absolutely not what I want. This is just slapped down, zoned out, just to get a population, just to fulfill a demand, and just to get some money. Because we are making money, and we've actually got quite a lot saved up, but we're gonna need probably like triple this, because I'm gonna be doing a major overhaul in the next episode. So just to like show you why I wanted to make all this super detailed is because I reckon that this is such a great viewing point of St. Andros, and it gives you like a really good sense of the scale of the place. But there are a few little areas that I still need to detail up. I would like to figure out what we're gonna do down here, because I had a couple of ideas. We could dedicate this to a bit more marshland, which I've done a similar thing over here, but I reckon that this would be a pretty good spot for a bit of a junkyard. I think that junkyards do typically get pushed into random spaces like this, especially if there's nothing else that could really survive in a random area like this. You know, this is squished between a noisy highway and a noisy rail yard. So Putting anything else, like housing wouldn't fit. I don't think many other industries would fit, especially if you're dealing with boxy buildings like this or warehouses. You would find that a junkyard would actually be perfect because you're pretty much just filling the space with a whole bunch of junk. So with that in mind, I am going to connect him up to this road over here. Oh, and just going on the whole random space idea, I've actually haven't spoken about this before, but see this road here? So this was the old highway that we did at one point connect up to this road over here, and I have kept the pillars and just a segment of this highway. I was about to remove the entire thing, but I actually kind of like the idea that just a part of it still remains. Because you can imagine it'd probably be more money and more resources to remove the entire segment. So the pillars remain and this tiny little section does too. But yeah, I reckon that this is the perfect candidate for a big old junkyard. So after working out that clearance, the height difference is actually pretty extreme around here. So I mean, that's gonna affect the way that I create this junkyard, which should be kind of interesting. I will just smooth them out around here. And this is actually gonna be pretty large. I am going to stretch him all the way through here and just make little lots where I'm going to dedicate to different types of waste. And I'm also going to make this functional. So we will in fact see some sort of garbage trucks leaving this facility, and it might struggle up here, but whatever. Love it. Love it so much. I just wish we had some sort of copy and paste because, oh man, my hands are getting a little sore just placing down every single one of these items, but I am sure that's on its way at some point. It's going to make a lot of the detail work just so much easier. But I'm really loving the way that this is looking. I've left gaps open because well, again, I wish we had copy and paste. But I do wonder if we do something a little bit different down here. So if you've got some ideas, let me know, because we could do a little bit of marshland just poking through, or maybe dedicate it to a different type of junk waste, industrial waste. Let me know. Maybe that'll be something we tackle in the live stream. But yeah, we do have a couple of areas still left to do. I've also gone through and placed a few more rows of trains just waiting here. And yeah, I mean, I love it. I think this makes it look just so much more atmospheric, and it's gonna be really cool when we actually start seeing some trains leaving our facility as well, and going through all this. I've just made sure that I've left gaps where I reckon that the trains will be traveling through, so nothing on this main line in the middle here. They're mostly just in these other sections, so hopefully that'll work well. This guy just spawning in. So yeah, we do obviously have a lot more left to do and figure out, but I will leave a lot of that for later on. In fact, I'll leave all of it until later on. Good man. Put that out. But guys, next week, or next episode, we need to tackle a very, very serious problem. We're going to be leaving Smog Island, and we're going to be going back to the mainland. We're going to where it all began. I mean, just look at this mess. It is a mess in all aspects of the word, because just look at all the problems. Look at all these random buildings I've just spawned, zoned, and forgotten about. I've not forgotten about it. We're going to be tackling all of this in the next episode. It should fix a lot of these traffic woes, which is just an absolute nightmare. There is just a lot of problems within St. Andros, and it's either going to get far better or much, much worse. But that is for the next episode. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of St. Andros. Oops, did I forget to make that junkyard functional? Yeah, remind me to do that a little bit later, because I do think that'd be a really nice touch, but I completely blanked it as I finished up this video. This was definitely a long one. I probably could have split this into 2 builds, but wanted to get a pretty good chunk of Smog Island complete and move on to the other part of the city, which is going to be truly epic and a little bit confronting and a little bit scary, because I reckon we're going to cause all sorts of problems. Not that the city is functioning well at the moment, but yeah, I think you know what I mean. But anyway, guys, that'll be the next episode. A big thank you all for watching this one, and a big shout out to my beloved patrons and YouTube members for making videos like this possible. Anton Langner, Raycon, Chris Cavana, Scott Stafford, Bruce Quinn, Edward Kim, Bart, James Lester, Justin Sadunek, Andy Jones, and Jay Evans III. Cheers, legends. Catch you all in the next one. See ya.